Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Flood, and thanks for coming to my talk about alligator-engineered impacts on consumer nutrient dynamics and isotopic niche. I'd like to start with some acknowledgments to my co-authors, my committee members, my advisor, Joel Trexler, our incredible, invaluable team of research technicians that help with both fieldwork and laboratory processing, and of course, all of the funding sources that made this work possible. So with that, let's jump right in. In the Florida Everglades, alligators dig and maintain alligator ponds, this open water habitat that you see here. You follow my cursor. And I'll simply refer to these as ponds. The physical engineering of the pond by alligators also creates this dense ring of vegetation surrounding the pond, which I'll refer to as the near pond. Now, my co-author Bradley Strickland's dissertation, he shows that there are distinct plant and consumer communities in each of these different habitat types across this gradient. So this work is part of a larger project where we sampled 10 ponds, 5 in Shark River Slough here, and 5 in Taylor Slough, several of which are pictured on the slide. And for this portion of the project, we set out to determine the effects of physical engineering by alligators through asking 3 questions. Are there differences among habitats in basal resource nutrient status, as reflected by stoichiometric ratios of flocculent matter? Are there differences in consumer stoichiometric ratios for 2 abundant fish consumers? And are there differences in isotopic niche, a proxy for dietary niche, across this habitat gradient? And we did see a trend in flock stoichiometric ratios across habitats. Here in panel A, we have flock N to P, panel B is flock C to N, and panel C is flock C to P. Sites in Shark River Slough are solid lines, whereas Taylor Slough are dashed lines, and individual sites have different colors. These asterisks represent statistical differences at a 95% threshold. So you can see that all of these comparisons were distinct from one another, except for the near pond N to P ratios, which were not distinct from one another, but were distinct from the adjacent marsh. So what we're seeing here is a consistent trend of decreasing nitrogen to phosphorus across this habitat gradient, and decreasing C to P across this habitat gradient, which shows a trend in increasing phosphorus from marsh to near pond to pond. Conversely, for the stoichiometric ratios of consumers, we did not see any trends. Here in panel A, we have the C to N ratio, panel B, the C to P ratio, and panel C is the N to P ratio. In purple, we have the eastern mosquitofish, Gambusia holbrooki, and in yellow, we have the bluefin killifish, Lucania goodii. And as you can see, there were no trends for either species across this habitat gradient. Consumers maintained stoichiometric homeostasis, which is what's predicted by stoichiometry theory, and it says that consumers will modulate their internal stoichiometry to maintain these ratios regardless of changes in diet. On the other hand, we did see differences in the isotopic niche, remember, a proxy for dietary niche, across this habitat gradient. Again, eastern mosquitofish are in purple, and they have sort of a monotonic relationship across this habitat gradient with the largest niche area in the near pond, which may be the result of an increase in terrestrial arthropods in their diet. That dense vegetation that surrounds the pond has a lot of ants, grasshoppers, spiders, things of that nature. And then again in yellow is the bluefin killifish, and if you squint, this is sort of a linear relationship across this habitat with the largest niche area in the marsh and a rather narrow niche area in the pond. Perhaps there's some high quality diet item that's more abundant in the pond that allows them to specialize on it. So in conclusion, we found that alligator-engineered habitats have higher phosphorus levels. Consumers maintained homeostasis. Their stoichiometric ratios were the same across this habitat gradient. And the isotopic niche varied for both consumers across the habitat gradient, although the magnitude and direction were species specific. Going forward, as I mentioned, this is part of a larger food web project. We're interested in quantifying the landscape coverage of alligator ponds, and we're also interested in the relationship among alligator ponds, phosphorus, and biological invasions. So with that, thanks for tuning into my talk, and I'm happy to take any questions later in the session. Thanks.